A rally in support of banned group Palestine Action will go ahead in central London today. That's despite police and politicians, including the Prime Minister, calling for it to be stopped after the attack. Well, Molly Malone is here with us, and these protests proving controversial. Tell us a little bit more about the arguments here.
Well, there are two sets of protests that we expect to happen, both in London and in Manchester. The ones in the capital, we expect upwards of 1,000 people to attend. It's in Trafalgar Square, and it's being organised by a group called Defend Our Juries, who have largely sort of emerged, really, their protests certainly, sort of disputing, arguing against the prescribing of this group called Palestine Action. Back in July, we've seen mass arrests because it's now basically a criminal offence to show support for Palestine Action. So that's why we've seen so many arrests. Now, they've, at this stage, rejected multiple calls for this protest to go ahead, not to go ahead, due to happen later on this afternoon, including from the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley. I think we can hear a clip of what he had to say.
My concern as a police officer is twofold. The risk that the timing of that event sends a message which, whether inadvertent or deliberately, endorses anti-Semitism. I think that's a deep risk to community tension, which is my concern. And secondly, we're going to have more than 1,500 officers dealing with the scale of an event where potentially north of 1,000 people want to get arrested for supporting a terrorist organisation, which I find bewildering and frustrating. And so our ability to stretch our resources across London and protect the communities that need it most is to some degree compromised by that.
Politicians have had a similar message. The Prime Minister has written in the Jewish Chronicle, urging anyone really to considering taking part to really think again, asking them to respect the grief of British Jewish people and not, in his words, to stoke further tension between communities. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, saying similar, actually talking after the attack in Manchester about separate protests that had happened. She called them fundamentally un-British and saying, basically throwing forward to think again, perhaps to consider not to take part in these protests. Defend Our Juries, though, the group organising it, saying that it's a fundamental part of democracy. We heard from Zoe Cohen, who's Jewish herself. This is what she had to say.
It's a silent vigil. There's no chanting, there's no marching, there's absolutely no hate. And people sit there in silence holding a homemade sign with a few words on it. And there is nothing anti-Semitic about it whatsoever. And in fact, there's a significant number of the people who have taken part in the Defend Our Juries actions are in fact Jewish or of Jewish heritage, including people whose families are Holocaust survivors.
So, of course, the police, the ministers that are considering it really have to consider, I guess, the democracy and the fact that people do want to protest, but they're saying that now is not the right time and that actually these protests can happen at other points, perhaps in the weeks to follow, but not right now while people are considerably grieving after what we saw in Manchester early in the week.
Molly, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.